Something is very wrong, and this time it didn't come from tabloids, trolls, or conspiracy forums. It came from Tom Bauer, the man who dismantles carefully constructed public myths for a living. And what he's hinting at about Archie and Lilibet has sent shockwaves through royal watchers who thought they'd already seen it all. Because once you line up the dates, the photos, the silence, and the missing moments, the official story starts to collapse.
Absolutely. What we're really now seeing is that both of them, having posed as the victim for so long, are really the aggressors.
Harry's book, the biography, I mean, that's going to be devastating for the royal family because that's the only way that Harry can make his income.
The whole construction of her father, that man who in the end was abandoned by Meghan for months before.
Well, I think Harry is a very complicated person because he's not very intelligent and undoubtedly remains damaged by...
But ever since Meghan left Britain and then did the Oprah Winfrey interview, it's been really poisonous.
It was very early on in their relationship when Harry is bowled over by Meghan, is desperately in love.
They don't want to come back in. They want all the perks, the titles and the baubles and the power, but don't want to actually...
I mean, she stood up at the United Nations. That was her most famous appearance before meeting Harry.
Well, Meghan, I almost understood. She's a Hollywood B-list to be charitable actress. She was a social climber.
And I think that it's really quite sad that I won't be able to show, my children my homeland.
Given the security that you desire, if they deem that that there's a threat to you.
I choose people who don't want to be written about on the whole, and whose lives are shrouded in mystery.
Tom Bauer drops the spark and suddenly the internet ignites. Not because this is new gossip, but because it confirms what people have whispered for years. Odd timelines, missing photos, moments that should exist but don't. And the most damning part, Harry and Meghan say absolutely nothing. No clarification, no denial, no clean explanation. And in the world of public figures, silence doesn't calm curiosity, it feeds it. The longer they refuse to address the inconsistencies, the louder the questions become. So
William didn't know that Harry and Meghan had already recorded their poison.
The royal family stays distant, uncomfortably distant, barely any images, almost no interaction, and a glaring absence of visible connection between King Charles and his youngest grandchildren. That's not normal, not for this family, not for this institution. And when you step back and compare what should exist versus what actually exists, the situation starts feeling eerie.
The whole description she does of the Portland hospital, the birth, that was completely fabricated.
Haven't had any verification of who gave birth to those children, which is actually quite mandatory.
Kept Archie's birth private for over 8 hours. They did not tell people that he was actually born in Iraq.
Before anyone can look away, the warning lands. This story isn't about one inconsistency, it's about all of them combined. The photos that don't look right, the timelines that refuse to align, and the single question Harry and Meghan will not touch no matter how loud the internet screams. And that's where Tom Bauer steps in. This is what he does. He hunts stories buried under silence, lives wrapped in secrecy. People who desperately want their truths left untouched.
They want to be powerful, and they want to hide their secrets, and I just love digging away to find out what they don't want us to know.
Here's where it gets explosive. According to Bauer's findings, the official narrative surrounding Archie's arrival doesn't hold up under scrutiny. The Portland hospital story, it doesn't match the timeline that was publicly announced. Details clash, events overlap incorrectly, and sources claim Meghan never planned to deliver there at all. The whispers suggest a home birth planned from the start, but the public was told something very different. Dates don't line up, times don't match. Announcements appear delayed in ways that don't happen with royal births. Every other royal baby followed a rigid, transparent protocol. With Archie, that protocol vanished, and once people noticed that, they couldn't unsee it. Forums lit up, social media started connecting dots. Old statements were re-examined, and suddenly, even official defenses began to look shaky. Public explanations sounded carefully worded, but not fully truthful. And when official announcements themselves come under question, the entire foundation starts to crack. Royal births aren't casual events. They are choreographed down to the minute. William and Catherine's children? Every step documented, every image timed, every announcement aligned. But Archie and later Lilibet broke every pattern. No hospital steps, no immediate presentation, no traditional images. Instead, everything felt tightly controlled, selectively revealed, strangely delayed. And here's what makes this hit harder. Tom Bower isn't guessing. He's built his career on uncovering uncomfortable truths. He doesn't chase noise, he follows silence. He admits most of Meghan's inner circle refused to speak, emails unanswered, doors closed, only her father responded, and when everyone around a person refuses to talk, investigators take notice. Because that level of protection usually means something is being guarded. Then there are the pregnancy images. People didn't need inside sources to notice something felt off. The visuals spoke for themselves. The bump looked different from one appearance to the next, sometimes within the same week. Angles changed. Sizes shifted. Not normal progression, not natural variance. And the announcements, they didn't follow tradition, they shattered it. No easel, no structured timing, no familiar rhythm. The absence of hospital photos raised even more eyebrows. For generations, royal mothers stood on those steps. Diana did it, Catherine did it, every time. But with Archie and Lilibet, nothing. Just a controlled reveal, detached from every precedent before it. And then comes the most unsettling detail of all. Where are these children within the family? George, Charlotte, and Louis are everywhere, with King Charles, with extended relatives, at public events, in candid moments. They are woven into royal life. Archie and Lilibet, almost invisible. No family gatherings, no balcony moments, no documented bonding. Not before the move to America, not during visits, not even symbolic appearances. Privacy explains some absence, but not all of it. This level of separation goes beyond normal protection. It feels deliberate. And that's when the conversation shifts from curiosity to concern. Now look at Harry. This is where the situation turns dark. Sources describe him as consumed, scrolling endlessly, barely sleeping, watching strangers dissect his family online. The man who built his public identity around mental health appears to be unraveling under scrutiny. Friends describe paranoia, mood swings, withdrawal. The irony is brutal. Fatherhood was supposed to be his redemption, his healing chapter, the proof he broke generational trauma. But now that very identity is under attack, and it leaves only two possibilities, both devastating. Either Harry didn't know and was played, or he knew everything and helped maintain the illusion. Neither version leaves him intact, and his silence allows both interpretations to grow. Meanwhile, Meghan takes a different path. Where Harry appears overwhelmed, she appears controlled, strategic, cold. The approach isn't explanation, it's suppression. Shut down discussion, kill stories, apply pressure. But that strategy backfires, because when people sense forceful silence, curiosity multiplies. The couple who preached authenticity now look more guarded than the institution they fled. And the harder the narrative is controlled, the louder the backlash becomes. The royal family doesn't intervene. They don't clarify. They don't defend. King Charles maintains distance, and the contrast with his visible bond to William's children is impossible to ignore. No birthday tributes, no public warmth, no acknowledgement. It's as if two grandchildren exist in a parallel universe separate from the rest of the family. And that silence is deafening. What makes this entire situation even heavier is that the silence isn't just personal, it's institutional. The royal family isn't stepping in to shut this down. They're not issuing quiet reassurances. They're not leaking friendly counter narratives. They're doing what the monarchy does best when something feels radioactive, stepping back and letting distance do the talking. And distance in royal language is never accidental. King Charles is not a disengaged grandfather by nature. We see it clearly with William's children, the warmth, the familiarity, the visible bond. Those moments are not staged. They're not rare. They're consistent, which makes the absence surrounding Archie and Lilibet feel less like coincidence and more like a choice. People keep trying to explain it away with geography, America, California, time zones, schedules, but that excuse collapses under basic scrutiny. These gaps existed before the move, during visits, even in moments where a simple acknowledgement would have cost nothing. No birthday posts, no symbolic gestures, no visible inclusion in the family narrative. And when an institution obsessed with image decides not to include someone in the image at all, it sends a message. That message doesn't need words, it suggests caution, or worse, liability. That's where speculation takes a darker turn, because observers begin asking whether the palace is protecting itself rather than rejecting Harry, whether emotional distance is a buffer against something unresolved, something that could become complicated later, something they don't want tied too tightly to the crown. And that thought alone is enough to keep forums buzzing and analysts digging. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, another pressure is quietly tightening its grip: money. This part rarely gets discussed openly, but it explains far more than people realize. When Harry and Meghan walked away from royal life, they didn't just leave tradition behind, they left guaranteed financial structure, security, housing, staff, institutional backing, all gone by choice. What replaced it was something far riskier: commercial relevance. A Montecito mansion doesn't pay for itself. Private security doesn't come cheap. Staff salaries, legal teams, PR firms, travel, lifestyle, it all burns cash at an alarming rate. The Netflix deal was supposed to solve everything. So was the publishing pipeline. On paper, it looked bulletproof. In reality, it became a trap, because those contracts aren't optional. They're binding. They demand content, access, narrative, drama. Netflix doesn't pay millions for silence. Publishers don't offer massive advances for privacy. They want story. And story requires exposure. That's the corner Harry and Meghan painted themselves into. They can't step back even when the spotlight turns hostile, because the spotlight is what funds their life. Walking away now wouldn't just mean disappearing, it would mean returning money, triggering penalties, and potentially collapsing their entire financial framework. So they keep going. More appearances, more interviews, more curated glimpses, and every time they do, they feed the very machine that's tearing them apart. The irony is vicious. The more they talk about openness, the more glaring their silence becomes on the one subject everyone wants addressed. And that contrast destroys credibility faster than any tabloid headline ever could. Harry feels it. Sources describe him as exhausted, fractured, on edge, a man constantly bracing for the next wave of exposure. Someone who refreshes his phone obsessively, knowing he shouldn't, but unable to stop. This is the same man who positioned himself as a mental health advocate. The same man who preached therapy, healing, and self-awareness. Watching him unravel publicly doesn't just undermine his message, it exposes the fragility beneath it. The tragedy is that fatherhood was meant to anchor him. That was his identity reboot. The proof that he'd found meaning beyond royalty, that he'd broken the cycle. Now that foundation is shaking. And when the core story someone tells themselves collapses, everything else follows. Meghan, on the other hand, appears to be operating from a different mindset entirely. Reports paint her as focused, controlled, strategic. Where Harry spirals inward, she hardens outward. The approach isn't emotional, it's tactical. Contain, suppress, neutralize. But control only works when people trust you. Once trust erodes, control becomes fuel. Every attempt to silence discussion convinces more people there's something worth silencing. Every refusal to clarify transforms curiosity into suspicion. It's the classic mistake of believing pressure can replace transparency. It can't. And now the narrative has escaped the corners of the internet and entered mainstream conversation. This is no longer fringe speculation. Casual royal followers are asking the same question in different ways. Why does everything about these births feel different? Not invasive, not cruel, just different. Royal births have always followed a pattern that reassured the public without violating privacy. That pattern was abandoned here, and no one has explained why. That refusal has consequences, because you can't build a brand on authenticity and then selectively abandon it when scrutiny turns uncomfortable. You can't accuse an institution of secrecy while practicing deeper secrecy yourself. The hypocrisy doesn't go unnoticed, and the longer this drags on, the worse the outcome becomes. At this point, even transparency might not fix it. Once public trust fractures, answers feel like damage control instead of clarity. The moment to shut this down cleanly passed a long time ago. Now, every silence reads as confirmation to critics and cowardice to supporters. And caught in the middle of all of it are two children who never chose any of this. They didn't ask to be symbols, they didn't ask to be questioned, they didn't ask to be separated from visible family bonds. They're collateral in a war between narrative and reality. What's undeniable now is that deflection hasn't protected anyone. Not Harry, not Meghan, not their image, not their family. It has only amplified scrutiny and deepened doubt. The couple who promised transparency have become more opaque than the monarchy they escaped. The fairy tale they sold has curdled into something darker, a story of control, silence, pressure, and unraveling identity. And the most uncomfortable truth of all, only two people can end this. They've had countless opportunities to clarify, explain, or confront the questions directly. They chose avoidance instead, and now they're living inside the consequences of that choice. Each passing week makes repair harder. Each unanswered question sharpens suspicion. Even if they speak now, the damage may already be irreversible. Because when a story collapses under its own inconsistencies, no amount of narrative management can rebuild belief. And that's where this stands, not as gossip anymore, but as a slow motion implosion that could have been avoided and wasn't avoided.